It's my great good fortune and pleasure this morning to be able to introduce our keynote speaker. Miyashiro has been helping teams and groups think together in front of each other in new ways for more than 27 years. From Fortune 100 companies to small nonprofit associations, her clients report greater productivity, increased personal meaning, and more human connections. Miyashiro.
I was meeting with an executive director last year, and she said to me, you're so easy to talk to, thank you so much. And I thought, oh, this is just wonderful to hear. And then she said, you're like a second mother to me. And I thought, I'm not old enough to be her mother. And then I started. And the absence I saw in business and in nonprofits is this idea that somehow the work is more important than the relationship. That somehow the work was more important than the people. That one of the reasons why empathy is so powerful is because the head is a logical mechanism. And the head is very sequential, and it waits for all the pieces with logic to fall into place. So that's a good thing. But consequently, it tends to be slow. You know, you have to, by the time you think of something, the world might have changed around you. The heart, on the other hand, you know, the opening of the heart, this idea in business that you might call trust and engagement, that's how heart manifests in workplaces and in organizations, in your nonprofits. The heart is very fast. It works like lightning. You know, you can be with somebody and in a moment create something new together because you had a heart connection. This is one of the key reasons why you want to have in your web a lot of trust and engagement. Because then when something happens, you can make a change and you're all still integrated and you're all together. We live in this kind of system, but it is a system of exclusion. It's the opposite of what we've been talking about. This system also has three main motivators on how to motivate people to do something. And these are what they are. It's fear, guilt, and shame. In the middle, you see this piece. I call it the sandwich model because the middle is kind of like the meat, or for those of us who are vegan and vegetarian, you know, the tofu patty. So that's the relationship part. The thing that's very complicated about organizations, and I'm very passionate about this piece, so I hope I can communicate this to you. When there's interpersonal conflicts in organizations, they tend to be symptoms of something else. They are usually not the cause. I call it the stories we tell ourselves. These stories are completely coloring your perception of reality at this time. But we don't think about that. We think the reality is that person out there. We think the reality is what happened and what we're seeing out in our environment. The truth is that what colors our reality is our own thinking and our own histories. This is a very complicated way that organizations work. So I want to relieve you of any pressure that you feel that you think you should know how to do this, or that you're supposed to be really good at making partnerships and teamwork work, or that it should be easy. Because it's very complicated in organizations. So what's the solution? Well, the solution, I think, is empathy. You know, you can't buy trust. Trust is hard-won and hard-earned. And empathy is a very fast way to develop trust. The other piece is engagement. People get very engaged because they feel part of something. People want to get up in the morning and belong to something. So this is where these two processes, nonviolent communication developed by Marshall Rosenberg, and integrated clarity, which is the piece that I added. So nonviolent communication, or NVC for short, is primarily an interpersonal process. It's about what goes on between two people or also within ourselves. But it doesn't really address this idea of what happens when you bring it into the larger scope of organizations. So that's the piece I added called integrated clarity. And integrated clarity is really about this idea of organizations, a collective group of people having shared needs and shared goals together. I met with a group in a social services environment once. You know, they're in the business of helping people. And we were talking about feelings, and the executive director raised her hand and she said, I don't want to talk about feelings because it's not appropriate for work. So she's a social services director. She doesn't want to talk about work, she doesn't want to talk about feelings. And this to me is the fundamental principle. So here's what I have to say about feelings. Every moment that we're alive and conscious, we are having feelings. Feelings are not things in our heads, they're felt sensations in our bodies. So empathy is definitely empathic listening to someone else. It is also, as importantly, the honest expression of what matters to you. This idea I don't hear very often. Usually we think about empathy as I'm listening to you, I'm listening to you, I'm listening to you. Empathy is also about me honestly expressing to you what's important to me and what matters to me, having heard what you said. Empathy is not something you give to someone else or you get from someone else. It's the space that happens between two people when this process is going on, when we're both listening empathically and expressing honestly. Most people, because most of us still work in a hierarchy. Most of us still work in a place where someone has more authority than we do. It's not good or bad, it's just the way it is. So how can you become a leader in an environment like that? The less structural power you have, the more skill you need with the power of your heart. That's how informal leaders are born. And if you look at organizations, we work with a lot of teams where the person who has the most structural power is not the leader. The leader is somebody who practices empathy. The leader is someone who's a terrific listener and can connect with what matters to the people around them. They're the person that everyone goes to. Do you have somebody like that in your organization? Somebody that everybody wants to talk to them. They want to see what this person thinks. That is really what leadership is about. If you're discouraged because you might not have formal power, I want to encourage you because you can claim your own power by connecting to your own feelings and needs and the feelings of needs of those around you, especially someone who might have formal power. Thank you for listening to me.